Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southern-appalachian-herbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southern-appalachian-herbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Before we jump into the herbs for the day, if you're a regular listener of mine, you probably, hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Before I jump right into the herbs for today, if you're a regular listener to my show, you may remember that a couple of months ago, maybe 6 weeks, something like that, I really badly injured my shoulder, dislocated my shoulder, and it was healing up, and then I did it again. So I've had a serious problem with my shoulder for the last month or two. Can't sleep on my right side until really just this week. Uh, couldn't do push-ups or anything until like this week, really. Couldn't do a lot. Couldn't lift heavy items with my right arm, and a lot of limited mobility as well. Had to be very careful with that joint. What I started doing the beginning of this month, I got back into an exercise routine, very old style of exercise. It's called Indian clubs, and I really like this. I wanted to recommend it to you because not only is it very good exercise, it's low impact, and it was great for rehabbing this shoulder. And I forgot how much I enjoyed it. I hadn't done Indian clubs in about a year, and it really is probably my favorite, exercise routine. I used to lift weights a lot. I used to lift very heavy. I used to hit the gym at least 3 times a week, usually 4 or 5. And then I kind of like maxed out on it. I started really injuring myself. The shoulder popped out once, well, twice actually, while I was bench pressing, really injured. The bar dropped on my chest. It broke a couple of ribs. It was pretty bad. Dislocated my knee when I was under about 500, maybe 600 pounds of weight. It bent sideways and swelled up like the size of a volleyball. So when I tell you that I used to lift heavy and I can't do it so much anymore because of weightlifting related injuries, I know of what I speak. I definitely have found the Indian clubs to be more fun than going in and just lifting weights or doing any other repetitive, strenuous exercise. Honestly, I hate running. I've hated running all my life. I always say I'd rather stand and fight than run because I'd rather get beaten up than have to run. I mean, honestly, I hate running. I love to hike in the mountains, I love to do stuff like that. But, out of the month of July, out of 31 days, we've had 27 days of rain. A lot of that rain's been very heavy, a lot of flash flooding and such. So Indian clubs is an exercise I can do on the porch. I can do it inside. I have to, I'm pretty tall. I'm 6'4", so I have to be careful not to hit the ceiling with the clubs. That's difficult. So I usually will go out on the porch where I have a much higher ceiling or stand in the driveway or in the yard or something like that. You may have seen Indian clubs before. Like if you watched any old movies, you probably saw them, like probably the Three Stooges throwing them at each other. Or they were even mentioned in one episode of The Simpsons where Bart turns into Bartman and he's in I think a gym and he's got some Indian clubs he's using. They look like bowling pins. And the standard size is about the size of a bowling pin. They usually weigh about a pound or two each. Usually people will start off with the 1 pound and go to a 2 pound. But really, when you get acclimated to it, when you get used to using it, you start using 5 pound Indian clubs. The reason they're called Indian clubs is when the British occupied India, when India was essentially a British colony, they noticed that the Indian soldiers and really just the Indian culture was very big on wrestling. And the Indian wrestlers, between bouts and while they were training to get their grip strength up, to get their arm strength up, would take these wooden clubs and swing them around in intricate patterns. And the English learned it from the Indians, and they called it Indian clubs. It actually became an Olympic sport. You can look this up, go on YouTube or whatever, and look up old Indian clubs videos, and you will see the Olympics. Especially before World War II, and amazing, intricate, like almost like gymnastics routine of swinging these clubs. And it was so popular, you'll see like hundreds of people standing in a field, standing out in front of like a big old health spa or a hospital or an Olympic event. Hundreds of people in unison swinging these clubs around doing routines. I found a couple of resources because, like I said, you can start with a 1 pound club and it's going to do you a lot of good. It's going to increase your grip strength, will help. It's good for the shoulders, the biceps, the upper body, the action of swinging the clubs and resisting the momentum is actually very good for the core, for the abdomen and the back. It's an excellent exercise routine that it isn't overly tiring. You don't have to really recover a lot from it afterwards. It burns a lot of calories. And if you want to, find something you can do inside or on the porch like I have to, um, you can incorporate this into your daily schedule, like 15 minutes a day. And it's going to be some of the best exercise you can imagine for the upper body. And I mean, from the waist up, really. And because you kind of bend your legs and brace yourself with your legs, you get some leg exercise as well. There are a very good website. It's called nourishingmoves.com. Nourishing Moves, this guy has done a bunch of videos. He's got them on YouTube, or you can go directly to his site of how to use Indian clubs. And I like this one in particular because he references my favorite Indian clubs book. It is an old book. It's from 1870. The guy's name was Simon Kehoe. He was an Irish Olympic athlete who specialized in Indian clubs. It's called the Indian Club Exercise by Simon D. Kehoe, sometimes spelled just S-I-M, Sim Kehoe, must have been his nickname. And really easy to read, good illustrations. It does help to see the guy in the video doing the same exercises, though, so you can really follow along and you're not just looking at the drawings, the illustrations of the exercises, which can be a little confusing sometimes. But just to tell you a little bit about Simon Kehoe, like I said, he was an Olympic athlete. He was really sort of like almost a Charles Atlas of his day. If you see him in the book, the drawings of him, the illustrations, he's always pictured without a shirt on. He's got his clubs, and he looks like a very slender, muscular Charlie Chaplin. He's got the little mustache and everything, and the baggy pants the men used to wear back then. And he was famous for one particular trick. This is when I tell you that Indian club strengthens the hands and the arms and everything. This will prove it. He had a chain, just a regular metal chain hanging from the ceiling, just a few links, and he would walk up to it and he would take his thumb and forefinger and pinch the bottom link and do several one arm chin ups with only two fingers holding on to the end of the chain. That's how strong this guy was. That's how, I mean, he was just respected throughout the world. He was sort of a celebrity in the gymnasiums and the health spas at the time. You can find this book on archive.org if you can't find a physical copy. Like I said, it was written in 1870, so it may be a little hard to find a physical copy. Again, it's the Indian Club Exercise by Simon D. Kehoe, and it's free on archive. You can view it, I guess you could print it out. You could definitely download it to a device. an e-reader or whatever you use. And that URL is archive.org/details/Indian Club EXERC 00KEHO. I think that's the end of the URL. But anyway, just look in and search for it. It's going to be a lot easier if you just search for the Indian Club exercise. So, like I said, that's a good option. It's always good to find a fun exercise. You can buy Indian clubs. Uh, they're really collectible in the antique world, by the way. The Indian clubs, if you can find them in antique stores, get some at least as a collectible because they can be very valuable actually. But you can get new ones off of Amazon or eBay or such as that. You'll find them often grouped together with like kettlebells and other old type of exercise equipment that's become popular again. And they make them from like 1 pound up to about 10 or 15 pounds. You can get these really big, what they call mace, where you're actually just swinging one big club around. And there are exercises for one club, there are exercises for two clubs. And like I said, it's fun. And you don't actually have to buy Indian clubs. You can actually make your own. Obviously, you could carve them out of wood. It's not very difficult at all to carve a mallet out of a log. At different points in time, I have used 2 half-gallon plastic liquor bottles filled with water. Screw the lid on very tight, put a little tape around it, a little duct tape so it doesn't leak, and you can swing those around very efficiently and make great Indian clubs. So that's one option. Another option I have like a set of dumbbells where you can unscrew either end and add more plates. You can add or remove weights from either side. Well, I just put all the weight on one end, and it's 5 pound dumbbells, so I've got two perfect 5 pound Indian clubs, not even adding the plates. If I'm going to do a single club exercise, I may put a couple plates on there and turn it into a 10 pound Indian club. Options are many. I spoke with a girl one time. She got into Indian clubs, and she actually went to Walmart and got like two kids' plastic baseball bats, like the wiffle ball bats, and drilled a hole in them, filled them with sand, and plugged that up, wrapped it with duct tape, and they made excellent Indian clubs. And she was able to adjust the amount of sand in there so they'd be light in the beginning, and as she built up, she added more sand. So tons of options. And like I said, it's just a fun exercise. I think you're really going to enjoy it. The other exercise that I've really gotten into, being stuck in the house with all this rain and shoulder injury and everything that was keeping me out of the gym and all that, I got into tap dancing. Let me tell you, tap dancing is perhaps the most fun exercise I've ever done. Uh, in 15 minutes, you're sweating all over and panting and breathing hard. And look, I'm not a dancer. I've never danced before in my life. But I found a few videos online that show these basic steps, like the time step and the shim sham shimmy and different things like that. And there's even a video out there you can find on YouTube called Hate to Exercise, Love to Tap. It's a lot of fun. It really is an excellent cardiovascular exercise. And I've been really surprised after tap dancing for a month now. I'm still awful at it, by the way. I mean, I'm a big goofy hillbilly. I'm not a tap dancer. But after doing it for a month or so, about 15, 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes a day, my thighs and calves have started thickening back up as if I was in the gym squatting and doing deadlifts again. So it's amazing how you can find these exercises that you don't really think of as exercise. You think of them as fun. And I think it's a really good thing because, exercise is as much a part of health as medicinal herbs are, as being out in the sun. You have to keep exercising or your body starts falling apart. Now let's get into the herb of the day. And this one you probably have in your cabinet right now. I love it when I can talk about a culinary herb or spice that also has medicinal value, and everybody already has it in their kitchen cabinet. So you can just run in there and start using this herb if you need it today. And it's probably going to surprise you. It's cinnamon. Cinnamon was once one of the most expensive spices on earth, and it was used far more medicinally than it was it's a culinary ingredient as like a to make cinnamon candies or something. People weren't even thinking along those lines. Cinnamon actually shows up in that original old bitters recipe that I've mentioned so many times called theriac. Theriac was the universal cure for all poisons. The kings like Mithridates and different ones were always experimenting with various herbs and various substances like small amounts of snake venom or small amounts of scorpion venom and such. They thought they could build up a tolerance. So any poison that was used to try to kill them, they could take a universal remedy, antidote, and survive that poison. Well, Theriac was one of those concoctions. It remained very popular from ancient Rome well up into the 1900s. It was still being prescribed in the apothecaries by the doctors in England. Theriac was considered an antidote for the Black Plague, even. I mean, Theriac was just really, people swore by it, and cinnamon was one of the key ingredients. We talked before about Swedish bitters. Cinnamon is a key ingredient in Swedish bitters. Cinnamon was an herb that was recommended from the ancient Greeks through the Middle Ages. You know, it's just being an absolutely essential medicinal herb. And cinnamon is a tree bark. I mean, it is an herb. It's an herb we use as a spice. Spices are actually, by technical definition, the difference between an herb and a spice is the spice is made from the seed of a plant. Herbs may be leaves, barks, roots, you name it, right? But a spice is specifically the seed. Well, cinnamon tends to get lumped in with the spices because of its spicy flavor. I mean, we associate cinnamon with allspice and cloves and, such as that. According to a really great website, I think you'll enjoy looking at. There's a company called Cloverleaf Farms Herbal. Okay, Cloverleaf Farms has an online herbal encyclopedia, and if you like some of the history that I've put out there, they do a really good job too. And I cite them whenever I can. And let's see, under their listing for cinnamon, they said it is one of the oldest tonic plants in the world. The ancients Theophrastus, Herodotus, Galen, Dioscorides, Pliny, and Strabo all mention it. They misspelled Strabo, actually. It's Walafrid Strabo, who wrote Hortulus. They have it spelled Strebo, which that's an alternate spelling, but it's just going to confuse most people because the book he wrote is actually all the books and such he wrote are under the name Walafrid Strabo, Abbot Walafrid Strabo. Anyway, they say Chinese use dates back at least 5,000 years. One Chinese ancient stated that if you took cinnamon with toad's brains for 7 years, you would be able to walk on water, look young forever, and never die. So, I'm not going to recommend eating toad brains, and I certainly don't think it's going to allow you to walk on water, look young forever, and be immortal. But the ancient Taoists actually had a lot of symbolism when it comes to toads and turtles and such. I certainly do not believe that remedy is to be taken literally. It was first used medicinally in Egypt and India and parts of Europe around 500 BC. Traditionally, it was taken for colds, flus, and digestive problems, and is still used in much the same way today. This is just the regular old cinnamon sticks or even ground cinnamon you've got sitting in your in your kitchen cabinet. Okay. Dioscorides said of cinnamon, there were several kinds of cinnamon. There were barks of several trees that were being called cinnamon in ancient Greece at the time. And he said the best of that is what they call muscellum, because in a way it bears a similarity to cassia. Okay, so eventually cinnamon and cassia and even myrrh and frankincense and such as that were separated into different classifications of plants. But at the time in ancient Greece, it was a little bit confusing. And really that continued for quite a while. I had a wonderful interview, by the way, with a lady named Stephanie. Just the other day, she interviewed me for her podcast. Her name is Stephanie Braille, and she does a great podcast. It's called the Holistic Health Podcast. She also has a Substack newsletter. We had a good time talking. She actually interviewed me about my book, Christian Herbal Medicine. And Christian Herbal Medicine is really one of the favorite books of mine that I have written. I did a great deal of research into this book. I really think it's one of the more important books that I've written, and it's actually my least popular. It is my worst selling book. In fact, when she didn't tell me beforehand that she was going to interview me about this specific book. And so we started the interview, and she said, I just bought your book, Christian Herbal Medicine. And she starts reading an excerpt from it. And I said, oh, wow, you're one of like 12 people who have actually bought that book. I mean, it has not sold. And I don't know why. Honestly, I think it's one of my better books. And the feedback I have gotten from people who have read it, they've just been blown away. I mean, they didn't know the history of herbal medicine in the way I present it. Uh, I point out so many times that if you go into a college classroom or most herb classes right now, you're going to be taught that herbal medicine was practiced by indigenous peoples, which of course is true. You're going to be taught that herbal medicine was almost exclusively the realm of women, which is absolutely false. And you're going to be taught that Christianity did its best to suppress and do away with herbal medicine, whether it's you're talking the Catholic Church, the Lutheran, or whatever. Absolutely false. Absolutely false. As I've mentioned, as I've described in great length before, the first Holy Roman Emperor of Rome, Charlemagne, demanded, decreed that the Benedictine monks plant, I think it's like 70 herbs. It's all the herbs that end in officinalis when you're looking up herbs and their Latin name, and to open free hospitals wherever they had a monastery. These Benedictine monks went out all over Central and Western Europe, founding monasteries that were also hospitals and schools and practicing herbal medicine. So not only did the church not try to suppress herbal medicine, were it not for specifically the Benedictine monks and the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne, the herbal knowledge of ancient Greece and ancient Rome would have been lost. We would have no medicine. The first medical school was founded by a Catholic, Muslim, and a Jew in Italy, and sponsored by the Catholic Church. And they brought in their three distinct medical traditions, herbal traditions. That's the first modern medical school. All the medical colleges throughout Europe and into England, those were all religious schools. Those were all before the rise of the Anglican Church and the Protestant Reformation. They were all Catholic schools where priests were teaching students about herbal medicine. By 1100 AD, Saint Hildegard von Bingen was the most famous herbalist and visionary in the world, a Catholic woman who the Pope was asking her, as much as her health would allow her to travel, to go to every church and give sermons and teach people about not only the theology, she was brilliant when it came to theology, but herbal medicine. uh, Going into the about say 1400 or so, we get to Paracelsus, and Paracelsus grew up in in a town where his father was the doctor, the main physician in the town, uh, for a town that was founded around a retreat, a monastery sponsored by Saint Hildegard von Bingen. He grew up with a very religious person. He was an alchemist, as all chemists were at the time. And he's where you start running into not any church trying to suppress herbal medicine, but at that point, doctors and apothecaries had formed guilds, unions. You could not practice medicine unless you were a member of their guild. If you practiced medicine, you had to use their set formulas. Paracelsus, they actually tried to kill him. They put a contract on him, and he had to go from country to country, fleeing for his life, sleeping outside of the road, and treating uncurable cases, especially among royalty and very wealthy people, wherever he went, because he pointed out that a lot of their formulas were counterfeit. And see, that's where I'm getting with this right now, and that's why I bring it up throughout the history of herbal medicine, especially as the professional class started taking over, and they started forming these apothecary guilds and doctors guilds, and these specific formulas that oftentimes by law were the only medicines allowed to be used. There were counterfeit herbs going into that, and that's been a problem. Culpeper pointed it out in the 1600s. He's the one that turned the English tradition of medicine on its head. By this time, this was firmly Protestant England. All the doctors were still using Latin because the common person could not write or read or understand Latin, and that kept the common man from being able to use herbs to treat himself. Culpeper turned it on its head by translating all their works into English, and they accused him of witchcraft because of that, and they tried to have him killed. And his big complaint was one, the herbs were given by God for everyone to use for their own health, and they were keeping it away from people, but also their formulas didn't work and were counterfeit. This has been a problem even getting into the 1990s when St. John's wort was so popular, and suddenly studies started coming out saying, wait, St. John's wort doesn't do anything. It turns out the scientists researching St. John's wort had counterfeit St. John's wort. They had been sold another plant from a respected herbal supplier that wasn't St. John's wort at all. You may remember St. John's wort was popular, and then it was unpopular, and then it became popular again. Well, I actually learned from the herbalist Michael Moore. He was the one that said, wait a minute, I don't think what you're using is actually St. John's wort. Let me get you some real St. John's wort. And when they looked at it, they realized, yes, they'd been using the wrong plant. It was sold to them. I believe it was three nationally recognized laboratories were testing on the wrong plant. Counterfeit herbs have always been a problem. But now, because cinnamon is such a popular culinary herb or spice, however you want to look at it, it is going to be real cinnamon. Right? It's going to be the actual real thing because while our Food and Drug Administration is absolutely horrible and corrupt and feckless and, just absolutely worthless in many regards, they do make sure that what we buy in the grocery store that calls itself cinnamon is actually cinnamon. So if it's not, like if you go in and you buy old vanilla flavoring, for instance, it has to say whether it's made from real vanilla or artificial vanilla. So they really do a pretty good job on making sure those labels are accurate. Well, cinnamon that you have in your cabinet right now and can use was recommended by Dioscorides as being warming, diuretic, softening and digestive. So he said it basically would warm the mouth and stomach. It would help with digestion and help, take off excess fluids. It's a diuretic, so it'd help with water retention. He says it draws down the menstrual flow and warns against it being taken during pregnancy. And he said it should be taken as a drink with myrrh or else applied. So he said it could be used internally or externally. He said it was good against beasts that put out their poison and against deadly poisons as an antidote. So ancient Greece, they believed, just like as in Theriac, that cinnamon was good against animal and insect venoms, snake venoms and such. He said it cleanses away, heats and thins pus that darkens in the pupils. That's interesting. And again, he said it's a diuretic. He said rubbed on with honey, it takes away freckles and sunburn. That's, you wouldn't think that in ancient Greece they would be that concerned about freckles, but they were. And that was one of many remedies that the ancient Greek herbalists have recommended for freckles. I happen to like freckles myself, so I think it's a little odd. He said it was good for coughs and mucosal discharges, dropsy, that's basically edema, that's the diuretic properties of again, diseases of the kidneys, and for difficult urination. He said mixed with precious ointments and in general, it is effective for many things. By the time we get to St. Hildegard von Bingen, cinnamon was just really common. It was just part of the Benedictine practice of herbal medicine. And she described it as very hot and its power is very great. It holds a bit of moisture, but its heat is strong and it suppresses dampness. That's part of her idea of medicine. It's sort of like the humors, damp and dry and hot and cold and all that. And in fact, she said it diminishes bad humors in the one who eats it often and provides him with good humors. So, eat your cinnamon and you'll have good humors. But he said the tree whose bark is cinnamon is very hot. Whence a person who is paralyzed by gout or has quotidian, tertian, or quartan fevers, those are the malarial fevers that would come every 2, 3, or 4 days, they should pour good wine into a steel vessel. He should put into it wood and leaves of this tree, of the cinnamon tree, using both the cinnamon bark that we would use and the leaves, which are not much used, while they still have the sap in them. After boiling it in a fire, he should drink it frequently, and he will be healed. One whose head is very heavy and dulled, and one who has difficulty breathing through the nose, should pulverize cinnamon and eat it often with a morsel of bread or lick from his hand. It dissolves the noxious humors which had dulled his head. So, I mean, just pretty interesting that she would have recommended cinnamon for paralysis. I don't know of a lot of research into that. I'm thinking that she's probably talking more like rheumatic type conditions than, say, being paralyzed from a stroke. I mean, you know, I don't think eating cinnamon in wine is going to help a whole lot recovering from a stroke, but hey, it's worth a try. But the cinnamon, the warming nature of the cinnamon is believed to be good for joint pains, um, for arthritis, and actually for sore joints and muscles, even like withered muscles. She could have been talking in that regard to like atrophy. And also, she mentions it as being good for getting rid of congestion in the head. And that's one of the reasons cinnamon has often been used for colds. Later on in the tradition of German folk medicine, Brother Aloysius uh, recommended cinnamon for diarrhea, vomiting, chronic gastritis, weakness, wind, heavy bleeding and hematuria, acidity, heartburn, gastric mucus, heavy menstruation, general weakness, and loss of strength. In 1500s England, Gerard listed several uses for cinnamon. You can tell it was very important medicine at the time. The first one being obviously that it makes the breath sweet. People back then had really bad teeth. They had rotting teeth often, and cinnamon was one of the things people would keep in their mouth to cover up their bad breath from oftentimes, rotting teeth, literally. He said it's dry and astringent and provokes the urine. He also mentioned, as Dioscorides said, that it clears the eyesight. Well, I, again, don't really know how or if that works, but it's worth a shot. He said the decoction bringeth down the menses, prevaileth against the bitings of venomous beasts and inflammation of the intestines. So, again, we're getting that as an anecdote, but also good for the intestines. He said the distilled water of the cinnamon was good for diverse infirmities. He said it was good for a cold, weak, and feeble stomach, eases the pains and fretting of the guts, it's cramping essentially. It amendeth the evil color of the face. I honestly have no idea what he's talking about there. Sometimes that old English, amendeth the evil color of the face. But he actually liked to use cinnamon as a condiment for meats. I wouldn't really think of mixing cinnamon with meat. But then again, if we think about some of the Midwestern varieties of chili, is it Cincinnati chili, I believe, that has cinnamon in the chili? And they serve it on pasta with beans and onions and cheese. I think that's the Cincinnati thing. I tried it one time. Gotta say, I was not a fan of cinnamon in my chili. No, that did not work for me. On the other hand, I love cinnamon and chocolate, so if I got to pick one thing, it's going to be cinnamon and chocolate. And he recommended the cinnamon oil for pains of the breast, comforteth the stomach, good for windiness, that's flatulence, obviously, for good digestion, and being mixed with honey to take away spots from the face and freckles. Again, we find it as being used for freckles hundreds of years apart in two different countries and very rather distant from each other, actually. And he goes on to list many, many more folk uses and ways that various parts of cinnamon can be processed and everything. When we get to 1930s, 1931, Miss Grieve in A Modern Herbal stated that cinnamon was carminative, that means good for digestion, astringent, stimulant, antiseptic, and yes, cinnamon has some antiseptic properties, which makes it very interesting. Cinnamon mixed with honey is very good for wounds, by the way. She said it was more powerful as a local than as a general stimulant. Well, what she means by that is like when you bite into cinnamon, it's hot, right? It also has that quality if you put cinnamon oil on your skin. It increases circulation to that area through that spicy heating action. She said it was usually prescribed as a powder, but could also be used as an infusion. It would stop vomiting, relieve flatulence, and given with chalk as an astringent, useful for diarrhea and hemorrhage of the womb. So that very interesting. Now, the reason she did not recommend it as a tincture, she was talking about it being used as a powder or an infusion. That's a tea. It would actually be like a decoction with the cinnamon. Is cinnamon, especially when powdered, becomes very unpleasant as a tincture. It has a mucilaginous quality to it, sort of like okra slime. You know, if you've ever had slimy okra, that's what cinnamon powder turns into in a tincture. Somewhere between okra slime and rubber cement. You can actually choke on it. It's pretty nasty. It will, some will stay in your mouth and some you'll swallow down and you will start to throw up. I mean, you can actually choke on it. So if you're going to make a cinnamon tincture, it is best to use cinnamon sticks and infuse them in alcohol. Cinnamon sticks and vodka. I do this in my daily digestive bitters, you know. I put out that formula before. I use cinnamon, clove, and anise. I use orange peels. I use Oregon grape root or gentian. You know, it's mixing the spiciness and the bitter and just you know let it sit in that vodka and infuse. And it does not get that mucilaginous quality whatsoever. So someone actually asked me last week, "Do you make a tincture out of cinnamon powder or sticks?" And I explained to him, "Yeah, you definitely want to go with the sticks." So that was just a little bit of a coincidence. Actually, if you're interested in Theriac, and like I said, it was not just considered a universal antidote for poisons, but it is a very powerful herbal formula that was used for plagues and colds and viruses and was really common. You could have walked into basically any drugstore in England, even in, say, around 1950, and you would have found a version of this for sale. And you can still find it some different places. I just found what Wikipedia told us about it. It said the history of Theriac begins with King Mithridates the Sixth of Pontus, who experimented with poisons and antidotes on his prisoners. His numerous toxicity experiments eventually led him to declare that he had discovered an antidote for every venomous reptile and poisonous substance. So, aren't you glad you weren't one of his prisoners? Obviously, they didn't have a good time of it. He mixed all the effective antidotes into a single one called Mithridachium or Mithridate. Mithridate contained opium, myrrh, saffron, ginger, cinnamon, castor, along with some 40 other ingredients. So this isn't one you're going to be making yourself at home. We're probably not going to be making any opium tinctures to start with if you want to stay out of jail. And obviously, you never want to mess with the castor plant because, yes, it's from which we get castor oil. It also produces the deadly poison ricin. So remember, castor plants can be quite dangerous. When the Romans defeated Mithridates, his medical notes fell into the hands of the Roman herbalists and physicians, and they began to make their own Theriac or Mithridate. The Emperor Nero's physician, Andromachus, improved upon Mithridatum by bringing the total number of ingredients to 64, including viper's flesh mashed into a decoction, of which birds roasted on the fire, well aged, proved the most constant ingredient. So isn't that interesting? With all the medicinal herbs for centuries, poisonous snake meat was like the essential. Okay, so again, this is probably not one we're going to be making at home, but I think it is absolutely fascinating. And if you find a formula, you know, closer to around 1800, 1900, yeah, it's probably not going to have a lot of that weird stuff in there. The Greek physician Galen devoted an entire book to Theriac, and The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius took it on a regular basis. Galen is certainly probably the second most important figure in medicine. I mean, Hippocrates was the father of medicine. Galen was the father of this really the scientific technique. I mean, he was the guy that was doing, a lot of autopsies and stuff and trying to understand the workings of the human body. So his system of medicine actually influenced the Muslim physicians far more than it did the Roman physicians, by the way. And so when I say that they formed that first medical school there in Italy, that was why it was so important that one of the founders was Muslim and another one was Catholic and another one was Jewish, because you had these three very distinct traditions that really came together and created what we now know as modern medicine. Of course, it would take about 2,000 years to get to the point where we are now. But yeah, Galen, super pivotal in the history in the entire history of medicine. And modern theory, like I said, if you find a modern formula, it's not going to be anywhere near as intimidating. You can still buy Theriac. You can still buy it from, reputable dealers. It's actually just a combination of valerian, cinnamon, and cardamom. So cinnamon is still the key ingredient, one of the three key ingredients in Theriac, as it has been for over 2,000 years. And again, that's valerian, cinnamon, and cardamom. Uh, Valerian root is a very common herb. It's a nice sedative. It's got a lot of good properties. And cardamom is a spice, which in properties is a lot like cinnamon, actually. So you can make this in your own kitchen. You can get some valerian root. You can put a few cinnamon sticks in there and a few pods of cardamom. Pour your vodka over there. Let it steep. I don't think it's going to be a panacea against every poison on earth. I don't think it's going to help you very much if you get stung by a rattlesnake or something. But it obviously is a tried and true herbal formula, which would be a good general daily tonic. I think that's really what it came down to, and it's used toward the end. So cinnamon obviously has been in common medical usage since at least 2000 BC. It was imported from China into Egypt as a royal gift and was used in ancient Egypt to embalm mummies. It's said to have been growing in Arabia by the 7th century. So it was a long time before there was even any that got into Arabia and didn't have to be imported from China. So I mean that just tells you what a valuable spice this was. I mean worth more than gold. And now it's just something common sitting in your kitchen cabinet, something you have in some big red chewing gum or something, when it used to be medicine and a gift reserved for kings. So, the next time you open your spice cabinet, pay attention what's in there because there are several of these medicinal herbs and the history, honestly, I think it's fascinating. I mean, these are the spices that fueled and established international commerce. These were the trade routes. These herbs and spices were more precious than jewels and gold and fine silks. The ancient world, the roads and the trade routes and the wars between countries were built in large part uh, through the trade and importation of things like cinnamon that we just take for granted today. So the other thing that's really nice about the ones that we use culinarily is they're usually not terribly strong. You're usually not going to get into a whole lot of trouble with them. They're not going to have any toxicity. We use these constantly in our food. It's not always true. You can actually do yourself quite a bit of harm. For instance, if you eat large amounts of coriander seeds or nutmeg. Oh my gosh, never have large amounts of nutmeg. I made that mistake one time. Nutmeg was recommended in an old herbal book for severe pain. And, I've had a severe back injury, and they said to take the powdered nutmeg, and I don't remember the exact amount. Okay, and I wouldn't quote it if I did. One of the worst experiences I've ever had. Apparently, large amounts of nutmeg cause, we'll call it very mild um, visual disturbances, a stupor. You can barely get up, move, or think. My lungs felt like they were on fire, by the way. I mean, it was the worst experience in terms of the feeling in my lungs that I think I've ever had. And intense migraine headache. And there was nothing good about it at all. If you ever read these old books written by hippies that tell you, taking a bunch of nutmeg is going to be like a hallucinogenic drug or a painkiller or however, I mean, you know, you don't want to take very much nutmeg. Trust me, it was one of the worst experiences of my entire life. And even to this day, sometimes when I grate a little nutmeg into some coffee or into a cream sauce, if I'm making a cream of spinach or a cream soup or something, I'll grate a little nutmeg in there and I catch a whiff of it and I'm reminded of this intense pounding headache and there's just mental confusion and something, lungs on fire. Trust me, do not make that mistake I made. But, again, it's a common spice. It's one we use every day. And at one time, it was quite valuable. And now we just take so many things for granted. Oh, and don't forget, please buy my books. Christian Herbal Medicine is one I particularly am fond of, and I'd love it if I could sell a lot of copies of that one. I'd love to see it out there. I'd like to see it in people's bookshelves, like in church libraries and in your home, so you can pass it on to someone. You can say, yeah, look, herbal medicine is very Christian. It's the foundation of modern medicine, and its practitioners have been Christian men and women from different countries and backgrounds for, over 2,000 years. It's not, new age witchcraft. It's actual documented Orthodox Christianity has been the driving force behind herbal medicine for most of the history of the Western world. I mean, at least for the last 2,000 years or so. Love for every person to have this book so they can give it to their grandchildren when the grandchildren start talking about maybe getting into Eastern religions or Wicca or something like that. And you can say, okay, you got an interest in that. Well, let me show you what our actual tradition of Christian herbal medicine is. You may find it very interesting and you will find it alive and vibrant, especially in German folk medicine and in the herbal traditions in the Appalachian Mountains, etc. I would like the book to be used for that purpose, so that people, well, they know their history, they know their heritage, and they're grounded in something. All my books are available on Amazon.com. I will send out a link when that podcast comes out, when the holistic podcast comes out that I was interviewed on last week. That'll go through my Substack newsletter. So if you're not signed up for my Substack newsletter, please go ahead and do so. It's free. JudsonCarroll.com or Judson Carroll Master Herbalist on Substack. And again, y'all, have a great week. Stay safe. Stay curious, especially about those little things like in our spice and herb cabinets that we take for granted. You never know what's going to be lurking there. So I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.